Shall we get on with it? Hello and welcome to Nikon Report, your weekly roundup of all the latest Nikon news and all other photographic announcements that we found interesting. It's Konstantin here, and here is
Becky.
All right, let's get to the news. So, Nikon Q3 financial report. We remember that. I know you love that. So let's go back to it. Nikon finally published their Q&A session that they normally air after the financial report has been delivered.
This is actually interesting.
Yes, it is.
Unlike last week's segment.
Yes, lots of slides and graphs. So 2 questions were asked with regards to their imaging business.
Mm-hmm.
First one was, are you confident in turning a profit in the next fiscal year?
Yes.
All right, so most of the answer was a basically generic PR answer.
Right.
But there's interesting thing they mentioned there, that they will continue to expand their mirrorless lineup, and at the same time they will lower their break-even point by advancing restructuring. And restructuring at the moment is progressing very smoothly.
Okay. The second question was, is Nikon's revenue decreasing significantly compared to the industry as a whole?
Again, while looking through non-answer from Nikon representative, I highlighted a few interesting moments.
Okay.
What they write about is basically, in the entire market, the percentage of entry-level models where the price competition is fierce, it's still high in volume.
Yes.
So what that means is basically they still shift in high volumes in their entry-level product lineup. So I guess it's D3000, D5000 series cameras.
Right, yes.
What they say next, rather than the share and the sales volume of the entire market, we are developing our business focusing on the share and number of the mid to high-end cameras and lenses that we consider to be our main battleground.
Right. So this is moving on from, rather than focusing entirely on the lower end.
So basically on everything, yeah.
Yeah, they're moving the focus to things which are both more competitive.
Yes.
And also, although there's a lower sales volume, a higher profit margin.
Yes, definitely.
On these higher end items. So I suppose if we were looking at models, you'd say, okay, so they're not focusing so much on 3000, 5000 series.
Mm-hmm.
Possibly a little shifting focus. Even the 7000 series I would consider to be...
I think that's gone. I think that becomes a Z50.
Yes, exactly. So then they'd be looking at Z50, the Z6II Z7 II, and whatever may come in the future.
Exactly, and high-end DSLR. So effectively maybe D850 or D880, whatever that is.
Yeah, and the D780.
Exactly.
Right, and I suppose D500 is still considered, that's a professional level, but still mid-range,
exactly.
mid to high-end.
Exactly. So
camera.
the main takeaway here is low volume but higher margin.
Yes.
Yeah. They also say that by suppressing expenses through restructuring, again, we talked about it last week, we aim to transform the business in one that can generate profit even at sales below 150 billion.
Right. Okay. Because 150 billion they consider to be the threshold of...
Yes. So that's what they expect in the market will be. Mm-hmm. So it is lower. It's been shrinking for years now. Mm-hmm. And all they try to be, okay, if this is happening naturally and eventually, unfortunately, this is the figure we expect to be at. So we need to make it profitable as a company.
That makes sense. And when you look at those entry-level bodies, obviously we've often talked about in our live streams and on other videos how this is the D3500 is the top-selling camera for Nikon.
Yes.
But most people these days, if they're going to use an entry-level camera or let's say their level of photography is there, they'd probably be more inclined to use their phone than they would, or possibly even a compact system camera. I mean, does entry level also include the Coolpix cameras, do you think?
I would say so, but Coolpix market is probably non-existent at this stage.
Almost.
Yeah. We will come back to the entry-level cameras in our next segment.
Okay.
So leave it at that.
Sure.
But they also have a precision equipment business.
That's right. We talked about that last week.
We don't want to concentrate about it too much, but that's something that you don't see online on their website. So in their precision equipment Q&A, they had this interesting question. How do you think about the impact on business from a change to a new CEO at Intel?
Right.
Okay, why that would be?
That's a very off-the-wall question, but it does make sense. So why is that interesting?
All right, well, let me tell you why, and I'm glad you asked. First, though, I'll read their answer. All they say is, we are not in position to comment, but we continue to work closely with our main customers. Our main customers.
Customers.
All right. So, Nikon supplies chip-making machines to Intel.
That's chip making.
Chip making machines.
Right.
So I thought at the beginning that Intel has a leg or foot in Nikon XP processor manufacturing.
A toe.
So I went there, and that wasn't true.
You went to the
Well,
factory.
I went all deep in research into the trenches of Google.
No,
okay.
Right, yeah.
So I looked in there. That wasn't the case. So they actually supply chip making machines to Intel. Now, in November last year, Nikkei Asia website published an article which states Nikon plans to reform to reduce reliance on key customer Intel.
So Intel is their big customer.
Exactly.
Right.
So why Intel changed their CEO? Well, company didn't do so well. What we're seeing now is that actually there's happening a big shift from Intel processors towards AMD and ARM processors. Intel has been stagnating for quite a while. The main bottleneck is the manufacturing technology where Intel is actually behind. So while the other companies are starting to use 5 nanometer chips,
right,
Intel is stuck at 10 nanometer production line. And this one has been delayed by 4 years.
Wow.
Okay, so even now we're starting to see a shift from Intel processors into AMD and ARM processors.
Yes.
Have you noticed Apple announced their laptop with their own chip?
That's right, the A1 chip. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's what's already happening. The big investment management firms like ARK Invest, and they're very progressive, and what's going to happen in the future. They published their report, which is called Big Ideas 2021.
Right.
And there they basically do a projection for 10 years, what they think is going to take off. So they were big in the EV market, so electronic cars back in the day. They also project that Intel is going to lose their shares in the next 10 years to another process. Their graphs and charts, do go have a look at that. The change of Intel CEO is probably a move in the right direction. So that means the company is trying to change the trend. The question is, with all new people coming in, will relationship with Nikon is going to change, first of all?
Yes.
That's thing number one. And the thing is number two, should Nikon to start to look at other customers to supply the equipment to?
That is a very good question. One that I don't have the answer to, but fascinating.
And that's something you don't get on the internet.
That's right. You can thank us later.
Now, since you're all half asleep, let's get back to the photography.
Okay, so the DF has now been officially discontinued in the UK.
What?
This comes after we did a live stream on the camera a couple of weeks ago. This seems to be sort of, we're sort of like the horsemen of the apocalypse when it comes to doing content on cameras that get discontinued.
The next week's live stream is on D3500.
All I can say is that we didn't get an official discontinuation notice from Nikon. When we did our live stream, they were still available to buy from the Nikon store. The following week, they were no longer available to buy from the Nikon store. So either our live stream sold out their entire stock, or more than likely someone spotted it from Nikon and perhaps thought, oops, that's not supposed to be on there. We don't have any anymore. Let's just take it down.
I tend to believe the first.
We just sold out the stock.
Exactly. But shall we take a moment of silence?
Yes, for the DF.
Yeah, okay.
Very silent. How long do we have to be silent for? Right.
All right.
Next
is product suspension.
Yeah.
What suspension means?
Well, ordinarily,
yes,
in football, if a player gets suspended, then they're normally not allowed to play for a second.
I like that you tell me about football. This is great. I want to hear more, please.
So I'm assuming that these products have been given a red card.
Yes, okay.
And will not be playing for the remainder of the season.
Okay.
Or whatever it is.
So 1 year, 2 years? Let's mention the products in question. So it's MC-21A Remote, MC36A Remote, DG2 Magnifier. I thought that one was discontinued a while back.
No.
And the last one is SD9 external power supply for Speedlights. It appears that these products that were produced by facilities that are being closed in Nikon's factory consolidation, so those are factories in Japan.
Yes.
It is unknown whether or when these products will begin production again.
That is quite sad. The MC36A is the remote called with an intervalometer, designed for 10-pin socket cameras. The MC-21A is a 10-pin to 10-pin extension cable. The DG2 magnifier is a magnifying eyepiece. And the SD9 is the power pack for SB 900-910 that allows you to have an additional 8 batteries.
Yes, it does take additional batteries.
So those products aren't necessarily the best sellers of accessories. And we do have, I think, at least one SD9 in stock and we have a good few DG2s. But MC36As, I know that we've been short on for a while. MC-21As, I'm not entirely sure. But these have been out of stock with Nikon themselves for a number of months already. I wonder why it's taken them so long to do an official announcement on it.
That's true. It's definitely sad to see them go.
Yes.
In the next news, we've seen a couple of articles being published in Z6 and Z7 Mark II cameras' capability of shooting 120 images per second. 120 images. Okay, well, there are obviously some caveats with it. So camera has to be in the video mode, first of all. You can only shoot JPEG and only in resolution that's been selected for the video. So 120 frames per second is only available in 1080p mode, which is equivalent of 2.1 megapixel. The 60 frames per second will be available in 4K after February Nikon update, which it hasn't been out yet, but we should see it any day now. 4K resolution is roughly 8.3 megapixels.
Yes, essentially what this 120 frames per second means is that it's a screen grab.
Yes.
While you're in video mode shooting. It's just grabbing the screen.
From the video feed, effectively.
Yes, exactly.
And it shoots JPEG. So if you do shoot JPEG, make sure you set it to JPEG fine for the best possible quality.
Next up, Nikon UK School has been relaunched and is offering 20% off online courses booked before the 31st of March with the code Nikon School New 20. Now, we saw the closure of Nikon School's premises in Margaret Street back somewhere mid-lockdown, I think it was, mid last year, which was very, very sad. I always enjoyed doing courses and visiting the actual school itself, and it was a great place to send people if they wanted to try out cameras or lenses that we couldn't keep in stock and demonstrate. But understandably, with the world moving to online courses and meetings, and that sort of being the way that things are going, it does make sense for Nikon not to have that sort of premium bit of real estate there in Margaret Street when nobody can come and visit it. So now we have new courses and we have a discount.
Yeah, so Rishi from YouTube channel Rishi Talks, he works at Nikon School. So if you want to see him live, you probably should pay for that course.
Yes.
All right. In another news, company Kirk released their L brackets for Nikon Z6 and Z7 cameras. They also released the Z5 bracket as well. You can buy them on their website or in B&H in the United States. It's a Arca Swiss, I think, mount on both of them.
It is.
And they're well made, aren't they?
They are. I would like to point out that the three-legged thing, which is a UK British-made brand, L plate for the Z6 and the Z7, it's called the Zelda, does also fit the Z7 II and the Z6 II. The only problem is that Nikon have changed the style of the remote, the WRR11, and because it's got that sort of funky little shape, you now can't fit that in with the L bracket on. That's the only caveat.
Okay, do you think Mario version will fix that?
Maybe. The Link version.
But do support your local manufacturer.
Yeah, so British-made three-legged thing. We do also stock them. So if you do need an L bracket sourced in the UK and you're not particularly after the Kirk one, then we can get those for you. For a limited time, Nikon Japan is offering servicing to old SLR cameras and old manual lenses, such as the Nikon F, F2, F3, FM, and Nikomats.
So do you think they found someone who can fix them?
I think maybe they unearthed a little kitty of spare parts when they were doing the factory move out, because the main issue with ever getting those serviced or repaired was the fact that they didn't have spares for them. So maybe they suddenly unearthed this treasure trove.
A warehouse.
They thought, hold on a second, that's where all the spare base plates and you know what the hardest thing to get hold of is?
What, the leather parts?
No, the carbon track for the Nikon F meter.
I'd rather talk about Intel chips than that.
We actually have a couple of carbon tracks, brand new from Nikon Japan.
They're only about £10,000 each.
However, that doesn't necessarily mean that the meters will still be 100% reliable. I'd like to point out. So if you are in Japan and you would like to get your old Nikon serviced, then maybe worth having a little look at Nikon Japan's service department for that.
And if you're in UK, don't rush to send your equipment to Japan. There's still people who can fix film equipment in UK. So if you want any pointers, do give us a call and we'll point you into the right direction.
For sure.
Nikon Europe published 2 videos on their YouTube channel. First one is called How to Set Up Your Nikon Z6 Mark II for Wildlife and Low-Light Photography. I think that one is important. And second one is called How to Set Up Your Nikon Z7 for Landscape and Portrait Photography. You technically can do both for both cameras, but I think the main question we get about speed of autofocus on those cameras. And I think the first video will be quite educational.
For sure. And it's interesting to see Nikon actually show people how to get the best out of those autofocus modes and which ones are best used for what purpose. That's always been the big question, hasn't it?
Absolutely. Nikon published, and we mentioned it 2 weeks ago, their technical guides.
That's right.
For Z6 and Z7 cameras. There they mentioned 120 frames per second compatibility, but also set up for specific types of photography. So do check it out. It's separate from their manuals. And it's available if you go to Nikon UK or Nikon Europe website, to technical section, just type in your camera and it will give you all the documents for download.
Excellent.
Now more into rumors category.
The Z30.
Yes, it's happening.
That you keep talking about.
Exactly. We've seen more articles coming out.
That's right. Tom Hogan actually published an article which is very, very interesting. He said, yes, a camera has been prototyped more than once and even went through different processes of, certification and licensing for Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, etc. He said, likewise, I'm pretty sure that a 10 to 20 wide-angle zoom is making the transition from F to Z mount, which was targeted as a surprise co-release. Co-release with the Z30.
And it was a very nice little lens, wasn't it? It was very inexpensive because the one up would be about £600.
That's right. And when I remember doing comparisons between the 10 to 24 and the 12 to 24 and the, albeit plastic, 10 to 20, that little lens performed incredibly well, considering that it was a fraction of the cost. Tom also says, from Nikon's standpoint, there are pluses and minuses to launching a Z30. The big plus would be spreading parts costs across more volume. The Z30 would obviously use the 20 megapixel sensor already.
From Z50,
That's right, and probably other parts as well. Nikon Engineering loves parts reutilization and always has. Another plus might be giving the Z system wider appeal by lowering the entry point, as well as making a stronger statement that the whole camera lineup is moving to mirrorless. Now, he thinks that the big minus is it's unclear that a Z30 adds enough volume to justify the tighter gross profit margin in low-end products, particularly if any of its sales end up undercutting potential Z50 sales. I don't think that's the case, but we'll talk about that in a second. Another minus is that the pandemic is making it tougher for Nikon to get new products into production in Thailand as quickly and efficiently as they'd like. Moreover, some parts in short supply have to be rationed across models as well. Is the Z30 the model they want to commit those parts to?
I think they should, personally.
I completely agree with you. I think based on the number of people we've had looking, even in the last couple of months, for D3500s and 5600s, which we haven't really had the supply of, there's obviously a market for a camera that is below £500.
Yes, and historically, these cameras were their best-selling cameras all over the world.
Yeah, exactly. I do think lowering the entry point into the system is also important because it sort of seduces you into buying into the system.
Yeah. Let's talk about people buying these systems.
Yes.
They're new customers. They're not converted customers.
That's right. There's no brand loyalty.
Exactly. Exactly. And generally, people buy on the hype. So they buy what's on the trend. They buy what considers to be latest technology.
They also buy what they see other people using.
Exactly. So let's be honest. DSLRs are outdated to this type of people. Again, people like my brother, they don't read about the cameras. They just buy one camera with a lens and they're happy with it. They're going to use it for 5 years till it dies. He may, if he likes, then buy a more expensive camera, but he may just buy another camera in the same range.
Yeah.
So being competitive in this space is very important here. I believe that if we are transitioning into mirrors, which we actually do, the DX DSLR line, I guess everything not including D500, which is a prosumer camera. Unfortunately, everything in the DX DSLR lineup has to go.
It's very true.
Off you go.
Bye now.
And unfortunately, it's sad as it is, but if we are transitioning to mirrors, this has to happen.
It does. And as sad as it may be for those who have built up F-mount lens collections over the years, there is always the FTZ for those situations where you don't want to necessarily do the whole jump if you're already an entry-level DSLR user. I will also say, just from a social media aspect, I see a lot of people who come to me and ask me, what camera should I buy? I've never used a camera before. I've only taken pictures on my phone, but I want to go that next step. Those people don't want to spend thousands of pounds on a camera. They want to try it. If they don't get on with it, if it's not easy to use, if it's too big and heavy, they're not going to stick with it. They're going to go back to their phones.
So I think it's very important to get to this 300, 400 pound mark.
Absolutely. It's enough that someone would even ask for one for, you know, Christmas or birthday present or something like that. Also students who don't, again, want to necessarily go down a professional photography path, but they need photography as an aspect to their art courses or for media studies and their degrees.
I absolutely agree. The next bit of news, well, it's not really news, but Nikon Rumors has been on a roll this week. They published quite a few editorial articles, and one of them is called Editing Photographs with Nikon's Free Capture NXD. Is it worth saving money working with free software? So it was published by Michael Eisenberg. He's a Danish copywriter and photographer. So he writes there that NXD is a very capable bit of software and it does the job, but he also understands the convenience of paid bits of software like Lightroom and Capture One.
That's right. He says, while I would never claim that Capture NXD can fulfill the demands of every single pro or enthusiast, I would just recommend that you test it yourself in order to see if this free application can do your daily processing work, thereby saving you money otherwise spent on expensive processing applications. Now, I have an interesting real-life example of this.
Your brother?
Not my brother. Or my mate, or my husband. The other day, I needed to edit some photos. Very simple lens correction and some cropping. Nothing fancy at all. And as I've mentioned before, I bought the full version of Affinity Photo.
Just for that?
Not just for that. I bought it for general editing. But because I haven't yet fully familiarized myself with the layout, it would have taken me about a quarter of the time just to do it in Capture NXD. Because the Capture NXD layout is near enough to Lightroom. And both of those softwares I've used for years.
So you already have a muscle memory.
Exactly. And then suddenly going over to Affinity Photo, I was finding myself Googling, how do I just do these simple lens corrections?
That's why people don't like the change, isn't it?
That's right. And the answer was because you need to shoot in RAW for certain lens corrections, which I didn't know.
It's very interesting because NXD is a very capable bit of software, but it's overshadowed by the soreness of people coming from NXD2. So NXD2 was developed by Nik Software.
It's just called NX2.
NX2, Capture NX2. So it was developed by Nik Software for Nikon. Then they were bought by Google. Then something else happened to them. But basically, NXD came out with completely new interface.
Yes.
And that threw off a lot of people.
Very clunky interface, yes. However, the basic principles are still there. If you need simple corrections, Capture NXD will probably do it. I also find personally that it provides the best RAW conversion because it's made by Nikon, who make their own RAW files. So that's my
That's true.
opinion.
Nikon or other camera manufacturers, they don't really share their specifications, RAW specifications, to companies like, let's say, Adobe. So they all have to reverse engineer it. While Nikon native software does all that. So if you look at something like noise reduction or vignetting correction, that's all built in into the Nikon software. Lightroom has to reverse engineer it.
Exactly.
All right, back to numbers. Since you all love them, full year CEPA sales numbers are out. Not just for the month of December, but for the full year.
I feel so lucky.
Well, thank you, Nikon Rumors, for doing all the math for us. One day we'll do it ourselves. I bought a calculator the other day. So let's go to full calendar year. So it came to shipments of 5.3 ILC, which stands for interchangeable lens camera bodies. It was 8.46 last year and 10.76 in 2018. So the whole thing is shrinking, right? But cumulative mirrorless shipped value is now 255% of DSLR shipped value. It's not bad, is it?
That's not bad. I was just looking at the graph, actually.
Yeah, it looks like a penguin.
Supplied there. It's very interesting.
Yeah, it's like it's jumping off the cliff into the water, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a lemming, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I think penguin, but because it goes like with a big down, isn't it?
It does, and you can really see the drop off at the end of each year. Interestingly enough, is it April that there's always a big spike?
Yes.
Well, there was, except this year because COVID.
Yeah, that thing. Yeah.
So very interesting. The shipment of mirrorless units went down 26%. The DSLR units went down 47%, which is considerable. Now,
then we got lenses that are smaller than 35 millimeters, so effectively DX, are down 42%.
Right.
Full frame lenses down 26% year to date. Then mirrorless unit share has increased by 55.3%, was 46.8 last year. So that's good. And the ratio of lenses shipped to body shipped has increased to 1.7 from 1.68. So 1.7 lens was shipped to one body.
Excellent.
It's a good attachment, isn't it? So roughly about 2 attachments per camera.
That's right. So yes, that I was trying to understand why that was an important statistic, but now I understand.
Well, if you buy a new camera, how many lenses do you buy?
Usually, one or two.
If you buy a console, how many games do you normally buy?
At least 3 or 4.
Now we're talking proper things that we understand.
Things that we actually, yeah.
But speaking of CIPA numbers, they are projecting increase in sales for next year by 13%. So that's good news, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, it's a projection, but we'll see what happens, I suppose. We'll keep an eye on it throughout the course.
Yeah, I think the main problem will be the supply chain and obviously the stock availability of things. So due to a thing called pandemic. Yeah.
That's right.
Based on the above, I applaud anyone out working with a real camera these days. So Micro Four Thirds, APS-C, full frame, DSLR, mirrorless, medium format. We are all part of a club that is dwindling in size and interest.
So well done, you. You who carries a real camera around with you.
The next bit of clickbait news is called US Photo Merchandise Market Boosted by Young People and First-Time Buyers.
We got very excited.
Yeah, so the way it was presented that basically a bunch of young people from 18 to 24 years old, they bought...
63% of respondents
in
the 18 to 24-year-old age group had bought photo merchandise products in the last year.
That was reported by photographic websites that they say just photo products, not photo merchandise products. So what photo merchandise means?
So we've got cards and books.
Calendars.
Wall decor.
All right. And drinkware.
Yes.
Mugs.
So more and more people are putting their pictures on cups and wall calendars and things like that. More people are putting their pictures on things.
And that somehow should boost the photographic market.
Interesting. I like how they reach that conclusion. It's like more people are printing pictures, so therefore more cameras are selling.
I like the idea of connecting the dots.
This is the marketing malarkey index all over.
Yeah, but they're like miles away, you know.
So far, they're on a different planet.
Anyway, if you want to buy this report, because it is available for sale by the company, it's called Rise Above Research, you can definitely do that. Please don't send it to me.
A reminder for you that the CP Plus show starts on Thursday, the 25th of February and ends on Sunday, the 28th of February.
And Nikon is participating. You can register in the link provided below. It's online only. It's free access. Nikon is going to be there. And we are hoping to see new product announcements in there.
That's right. We will be watching Nikon.
Yes.
Very, very close.
Nikon has said that they will try to act faster, right? So they are 4 months, though, since their last camera announcement. And 5 months since their last lens announcement. So it's about the time, isn't it?
It is about time, particularly now that we've had our Sony and Fuji offerings. I'm hoping that that will just give them the little kick up the backside needed to do their announcement.
The cat's been out of the bag.
That's right. And the amount of people that are asking me now about whether or not we've heard anything on the new releases, whatever they are, saying nothing because I don't know anything officially, is too many to count now. So it's about time that Nikon gave us something. We're
going to see the flood of Nikon cameras on the market, isn't it?
That's the plan.
Or at least one.
At least a camera.
And fingers crossed.
That it will arrive.
Show me your fingers crossed. Here we go. All right. There's going to be also a bunch of panels discussing photographic techniques and all other things. I personally will be interested in a panel which is called What Mirrorless Brought to the Industry. And also they have a bunch of panels discussing the state of the market. And if you don't want to travel to Japan, even in online form, there's a photography show still scheduled for March this year in UK, isn't it?
There?
Also online.
The photography show?
Yes.
It's going to be in March?
Yes.
Yes, we talked about this, didn't we?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Good.
We'll report to you.
When it happens.
When it happens.
From the fields of my browser.
We have a couple of reviews for you this week. The photographer Jeff Livingston published his impressions on using the Z7 II and Z6II in brackets cameras. So have a look at the link below or in the description box if you're listening on the podcast, just to see what he thought.
The brief thing, he likes them.
In a nutshell. Spoiler alert. So I didn't know if we wanted to reveal his conclusions. So just read it. That's fine.
And another interesting thing that's been published this week is Nikon Rumors published a comparison of 51.2 lens, which Becky is still reviewing, with the Sigma 51.4G art lens.
I've basically stolen it. That's why I'm still reviewing.
Why are you still here? Why are you not traveling somewhere away from here?
I would if I could.
Yes.
So that review was done by Darius Brez.
It's not really a review, it's more of a comparison.
Oh, okay.
This comparison was written or was shot by Darius Brez, and he compares the two lenses side by side. There are full-size images available for us pixel peepers, so if you're interested in that, do have a look at that and check it out. All right, let's move to discussion point. Tom Hogan, who we love unconditionally, published an article which is called "The Mirrorless Myth Continue."
Do you think he knows that we love him? Because
I think he feels it.
Every week we talk about
I think he wakes up in the middle of the night and just feels the warmth coming through. Just that positive energy coming from other side of the pond, you know?
Anyway, so he mentioned some myths, and I think that this is kind of an interesting discussion topic.
Exactly. Let's play a game, Becky. Okay. I'm going to give you a mirrorless myth.
And I'm going to say whether I agree or disagree?
Exactly.
Okay.
Let's start with number one. Mirrorless cameras have poor battery life. Yes or no?
That's relative though, isn't it?
To what?
Depending on what you're comparing it with. Compared to a DSLR, yes.
Okay.
Compared to other mirrorless cameras, I would say no.
Okay. And in the test that we've seen, I think it's the TIPA test, I think Nikon Z6 can do 330 shots.
It can do more.
Exactly. In real life, you're looking at 500-600 shots. It's still not as good as over 1,000 with something like D850.
But then I could argue that my D850 would sometimes drop out sooner than that. So.
Oh, you had a broken one.
No, just depending on what battery you're using, depending on whether you're using the Bluetooth functionality, if you're using flash, VR, the back screen, there's so many different variables.
All right, no live view airplane mode.
No live view airplane mode, yes, then probably over 1,000 shots on a D850.
All right, I agree with that statement. I still think DSLRs are better in that respect. Number two, the electronic viewfinders, EVF, on mirrorless cameras have terrible lag.
Not the Nikon ones.
Have you noticed that? I haven't.
No. I did have, obviously, earlier Nikon mirrorless cameras, the Nikon 1 system.
Okay.
Did have a lag. Fuji, I also had some issues with the slight lag on the EVF, but no, I haven't had that problem with Nikon.
Yeah, I think the technology has improved quite a bit since then. I think if we would have this list about 5 years ago, it would make more sense than it is now, isn't it?
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to number three. EVFs aren't good for your eyes.
Are they any worse or better than screens and laptops, phones?
What about your phone?
That's right. Phones are.
What about the lights?
So do I need to use my blue light blockers when I'm using
I have
EVF?
no idea. I generally just switch off my eyes and I just plug the camera directly into my brain, you see. All right, let's move on to number four. Mirrorless cameras have terrible, small, or fiddly controls.
Again, I would say disagree on that one, unless you
have tiny fingers. Oh, me too, actually.
Pianist hands.
Can you hold a basketball with your hand? I can't.
No.
Okay.
So maybe that's the test. If you can hold a basketball one-handed, then perhaps the mirrorless cameras are too small and fiddly for you. But for most of the part, I would say that they're quite ergonomic. Yeah,
I still prefer to have the battery pack if you're using this camera professionally, and I still think that Nikon should release a bigger body, the size of D850, but having mirrorless body.
Let's see what happens at CP+.
Absolutely, CP+. Number five, image noise or depth of field is a problem. Why is that?
I don't understand that as a question. I disagree. So image noise, not an issue. The processors on any of the cameras are perfectly capable of handling higher ISOs than some of the DSLRs.
Yeah. And sensors are pretty much the same, like the Z7 D850.
Yeah. Then the depth of field, I mean, perhaps it's shallower. Is that an issue? But I don't find that an issue either.
I think Z7 gives pretty much the same depth of field as D850.
Yeah, exactly. So no.
All right, let's go to number six. Mirrorless cameras aren't as well built as DSLRs.
Okay, if you're looking at a D6, which is £6,500,
okay,
sure, I understand. That thing is built like an absolute
That's
army
right.
tank.
It's a good hammer. We actually had a guy who was attacked somewhere around Brixton, and he had D3S, and he whacked the guy with it. Real story.
Wow.
The guy who's bus driver, his friend, young friend.
Yes.
That was him.
Oh, wow.
That's it. And then he ran after them as well.
Wow.
So
people in Brixton made of tougher stuff.
Exactly. So they're well built. But yeah, it's I would say it's definitely not as well built as D6, but it's definitely better built than something like D3000, 5000, or 7000 cameras.
I agree.
Number 7, autofocus isn't as fast or responsive.
Okay, fast, I would say, yes, I agree. It's not as fast. Responsive, not so much, because the response time of the autofocus isn't slower. There is no issue with the response time. It's more the
acquiring the focus,
exactly.
the speed of acquiring
it's
the focus.
It's the speed of acquisition. And with the Z6II and Z7 II, when it does acquire focus, it is more accurate. So there's...
Because effectively you're focusing on the sensor, isn't it? So,
that's right.
Yeah, so it's PDAF system, effectively. I do agree with it. I still prefer to use D850 for speed of focusing, but I do find that my shots are more in focus with mirrorless camera.
Yes.
Number 8, mirrorless cameras don't make good sports or wildlife systems.
Ooh. Do I agree or disagree with that? I don't wholeheartedly disagree. Let's put it that way. I still think that DSLRs have their place for wildlife and also sports. I don't think that you should entirely rule them out for those types of photography, but certainly something like a D850 or a D6, even a D500 or D780, those are stronger cameras for that sort of photography.
Yeah. I think if you're using these cameras for wildlife and sports, you definitely should have a DSLR as your main camera and then mirrorless system for kind of as a backup, I would say. Yeah,
but there are also plenty of photographers, YouTubers out there who are using these cameras for wildlife specifically.
That's
and
true.
They're doing great work with them. So it's a matter of also understanding how the cameras are different, I think.
Yeah, and actually adding this, let's say 60 frames per second at 4K screen grab while in JPEG, it's also, something that can be useful for wildlife and sports photographers.
Yeah.
Because nowadays D6 can do what, 12 frames?
Yes.
Something around that figure.
14.
It's 14, okay.
Sorry, yeah.
All right. Number 9, phase detect on sensor reduces the sensor capability.
Why would it?
All right, this is a difficult one. We've seen that the PDAF focusing system, which is effectively autofocus system, is now installed on the sensor itself.
That's right.
Now, in certain conditions where you need to pull your RAW file quite a bit, so maybe lift shadows by 2-3 stops or more, you may get a little bit of bending, color bending.
I have not noticed that.
All right, so
very specific scenario. Though.
Very specific. On some cameras, it's more pronounced. On some cameras, it's less pronounced.
Right.
But it is there, and that's because the system is designed around it. So the system is actually on the sensor itself. My thoughts about this, I don't agree fully, but I can see where people are coming from. So if you do push your RAW files quite a bit, so we're talking about 3 to 5 stops difference in exposure or shadows, then you may look into that and you may decide if this camera worth to you or not. But for general use and in real life situations, I wouldn't notice that.
No. Okay. And what's the last one?
Lens choice is a problem.
I do slightly agree with that.
Okay.
Although there are now there's going to be 18 lenses this year, I think.
Okay, yes.
At the moment, there are certain types of photographer that aren't catered for, namely those who shoot birds and wildlife.
Yeah, us pancake shooters.
The pancake shooters. Those who shoot macro and close-up.
Yeah, I do love pancakes. Happy Pancake Day to everyone.
An excuse to have pancakes for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Yeah. So, in terms of lens choice...
What are we missing in terms of lenses?
So, we're missing something beyond 200mm.
To infinity and beyond, okay.
That's right, the Buzz Lightyear edition. We are missing macro lenses,
yes,
which I think are quite important. There are a lot of macro photographers out there who have started moving to Z system.
True.
A wider range of macros would be nice as well, considering that we've only got 2 on the lineup, and there could be many more focal lengths.
That's true.
That are macro, but particularly the longer end. I think we're catered for at the wider end now. So once you want to go beyond 200. Or if you don't want to spend £2,300 on a 70 to 200 and you want something perhaps a little lower end, your only option is the all-in-one 24 to 200.
That's true. That's true. So more zooms.
So something that's around a 100 to 400, which is on the roadmap.
24 to 105, something like that.
That's a good general purpose. Yeah, exactly. So Essentially, we just need to fill the gaps on the roadmap, I would say.
Add more DX lenses, and for some users who use tilt and shift lenses, introduce a native tilt and shift lens.
That would be great. For your weekend read and watch segment, we have an interview with Mark Roberts Motion Control. That was published by DP Review, and the title of it is Learn How Robotics Company MRMC Puts Cameras Where Photographers Aren't Allowed to Go. This is very interesting because I've actually been around the MRMC factory and I've seen their robots in action.
Yeah, you've seen it live.
I've seen them live, and I've seen how they use them for everything from movie production to events to sporting events where you can't have photographers in certain positions because of health hazards and stuff like that. And it's a very, very interesting read. So do have a look at that. The link will be in the description box below and also in the podcast notes for you. We also have a video.
Making a Nikon AM stereo camera.
Yes, it's an interesting video just from the viewpoint of what is inside an EM camera and why you would want to do this. It is literally just the making of, but you might find that interesting if you've got a spare few minutes. You might not. It's really boring.
You'll never get them back.
To be honest, I started watching it and then I was like, okay, skip through to the end.
But it's one of the things is if you just think, what if?
What if?
And then you just go with it.
That's right.
Well, last week we had a live stream where we discussed all Nikon 50mm lenses.
Right.
And the question was, why do we consider 50mm to be a normal lens or standard lens? Obviously, like the whole thing about that is people say, well, it's the way we see the world. But there's another take on this, and it's called How the 50mm lens Became Normal, very unconventional way of looking into 50mm lens. So this article was published by Atlantic back in 2018, but I thought it might be useful for you to read on weekend.
There you go. We also have an article for you called Photographing the Wave, the Coyote Buttes North in Arizona by Nikhil Shahi. Beautiful photography there.
But it's not a surfing article, is it?
It's not the kind of wave that you think. It's actually it's a landscape article. So do have a look at the pictures and also the report on how they managed to accomplish such photos.
So I was in Arizona last March, but I never made it there.
Never made it to the Buttes.
Not to the Buttes. And the last article of today, it's actually a movie. It's called The Way I See It, and it's an unprecedented look behind the scenes of the two most iconic presidencies in our history, Obama and Reagan, as seen through the eyes of renowned photographer Pete Souza. It's a documentary about him talking about how he photographed two presidencies. It's available on Sky as a rental, but also on Amazon Prime. I think it's about $6.99 to rent. It may be available free in your territory, but I watched it over weekend and it was very interesting to watch.
There we go.
Well, thank you for joining us this week. I hope you liked it. Do press thumbs up button and do subscribe to our podcast on all platforms. And if you do listen to an audio version, do leave us a review as well. We are on track for our 1 billion subscribers this year. So please subscribe if you can. Becky can be found on
Instagram at Rebecca_Danesi. And Konstantin can be found
on Instagram at Konstantin Kochkin. You can also visit my website, which is konstantinkochkin.co.uk. I'm about to start a blog, so to check it out.
That's news. You should have included that in the report.
Surprise, huh?
Well, when it's officially launched, you can.
So far, I'm publishing articles every day
on financial.
Financials will come. That's definitely will come. But yesterday, I published an article of our Nikon Report pilot episode.
Oh.
So in about 10 days, we'll catch up with our current episode.
Nice.
But I do plan to put some samples from different cameras and lenses.
Excellent.
In full resolution. So if you do want to check the bokeh and the detail, etc., do check my website.
You heard it here first, folks.